welcome to the Gibraltar this GSLP have built, where concessions of jurisdiction are achievements, no, improvements, where socialist car levies on the less well-off are designed while the chief minister drives his Porsche, where anything is said to anyone to get elected. And that's why so many people in Gibraltar, whether it's societies, clubs, associations, or individuals, have letters, pre-election letters, from the GSLP promising them the earth. This is the Gibraltar where many of those promises made are unceremoniously ignored and sometimes completely dismantled. Most famously, the promise to halve the state of the public debt in 2011, and instead of halving it, it has been more than quadrupled, making Gibraltar less safe and more vulnerable, less money for people. And so some of the contribution we had this morning was to attack what never happened, to disguise from what did happen and what has happened.
Keith Azopardi told the House that this is a government that just can't keep to budget. It's been saved this year, he claimed, because of a higher corporate tax. That, he said, is the only reason the books have managed to be balanced. People and businesses, he said, are keeping the government afloat with an over £60 million overspend. He said this was not a budget of big changes, and what it gives with one hand, it takes with the other, and does not cover the increases in food and housing. A budget of continued slow erosion of wages, which he put down to the mismanagement of money.
This is a Gibraltar where there is a growing litany, Madam Speaker, of serious financial and governance deficits. A catalogue now of waste and abuse, of financial abuse and democratic abuse, where there is a concerted effort to hide those uncomfortable truths, but inexorably they are emerging.
On the treaty, he called for a politically honest debate without spin and with a reality check. There are details such as the disappearance of Frontex, he said, which require clarification. But the responsible thing is to suspend judgment until the treaty text is published. It's not real, he said, to think the government negotiating for Little Gibraltar following Brexit has won the match 10-0.
We recognise the importance of a deal that is good, but we also say we must exercise careful judgment. And that careful judgment doesn't mean joining a bandwagon of cheerleaders of the government when we have not seen a single word of the text. It does not mean that because we have not joined that bandwagon, we are somehow lurking behind the door of Parliament with an axe. It is simply that we are doing what is responsible.
The opposition leader also replied to the Chief Minister's statements on the McGrael inquiry, saying it had been a saga that had shone a bright light on shocking things that people did not believe were happening in Gibraltar.
This morning, the Chief Minister focused his contribution on the McGrael inquiry on seeking to undermine it in people's minds because of the cost. There may be people who were listening to that who might think the cost was high, but might think he was trying a bit too hard as a core participant within the scope of the inquiry, accused of misconduct by participants in the inquiry, to try to turn the focus on money rather than on the serious, scandalizing issues that emerged in the inquiry. There will be people who might think he was trying too hard. I suspect that those comments will not stand the test of time, and that the real focus will be whatever the report says. Madam Speaker, we note the costs of the McGrael inquiry. These are high. We appreciate the presence of the inquiry is inconvenient, perhaps even annoying to the government, given the issues that are surfacing of conduct and practices. Sometimes in life, the biggest nuisance, the biggest murga, can cost a lot of money.
Keith Azopardi called for governmental, financial and parliamentary reform, claiming the delays to the principal auditor's report were politically motivated. The time lag, he said, only benefited people in the government. He accused the government of inconsistencies and half-truths and said a future government would only inherit unprecedented debt and departmental overspending. Keith Azopardi called for an end to zero-hour contracts, for transparency in procurement and for robust contingency planning. He announced the opposition would be voting against the budget again. He emphasised they were not voting against the measures, but against what he termed the repeated opaque practices and overspending.